Hi, it's a beautiful day, and welcome to another episode of Extraordinary Moments with Anita. And our topic for today is Unmasking the Narcissist. What every woman should know before it's too late. And my guest is someone who has been there, done that, gone through all the emotions of, living with a toxic and abusive partner. Today, she's here to share her story and to give you to show you the red flags that you should look out for. Join me as I welcome my guest. You telling us your full name and what you do.
Yes, my name is Billy Joe Arnold, and I am a worker in healthcare, and I'm also a single mother to 3 amazing sons.
Can you tell us your story?
Yes. How much time have you got?
As much as you can share with us, and if it's too long, we might have to call you back.
We'll keep it short.
Yeah. Yes. We have to call you back because I think that there's a lot that people need to learn.
Yes.
There are people who are already in that situation right now.
Yes.
And there's some people who are out but they're still struggling. And
Yes.
there's some people who need to know before they fall into the pit.
Exactly.
Right? So if we have to make this a part 1, 2, 3, I'm ready to go, right?
Okay.
So start by telling us your story.
Okay, so the one thing I just want to mention about narcissism is that it's a very hot topic right now in society. In fact, sometimes it's overplayed, and what makes that difficult is there's a lot of understanding, but there's also a lot of misconception when it comes to narcissism. It is very textbook behaviors. There are traits that can narrow down to whether or not someone has NPD or just high narcissistic traits. In my experience, I'll speak from what I've been through.
Yeah.
So I was married for 21 years in a marriage where I had met my ex-husband in church. And I believe I was 29 at the time. I was wanting to settle down, get married, and have children.
Like every woman wants,
yes, right?
Every woman's dream.
Yes, and I was in church, and I always prayed and believed that man would find me in church. And I did. I met my husband there, and at the time, I was ready. I felt I was ready in my heart to meet someone and settle down and start having children. And when I had met him, he was, very attractive physically, and, he presented himself very well. And his dad was a pastor in the church for many years before they came to Canada. They did immigrate to Canada back in the early 80s or mid 80s. And anyways, to kind of skip forward, we ended up getting married. We're going to skip a whole bunch of stuff, and we got married, and we have 3 beautiful sons. And what ended up happening, I think it was within probably the first 6 years, it was 2006, that I had discovered that my ex-husband had an affair. And I found the evidence on my own. And I had prayed about it for a long time. I had felt something wasn't right.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, did you
so for a while, and the part is that always kind of signaled things to me was that, people would tell me that he was a bit of a womanizer, like before we had met, that, he, was handsome, tall, dark, and handsome, and, he dated women and stuff, and that he had actually never settled down, and that I was the first one. And, I knew I wanted to be married and have children, and he had said he wanted the same thing. And so, but in the beginning, there were some red flags, which I'm going to speak on a bit later about the red flags you can look for. There are definitely red flags, which that was not a term so much 26 years ago. Like, we married in 2000, it's now 2026, going back 26 years ago, that was a term you didn't hear, right? Trauma is another term that we didn't hear, right? So at that
maybe
point,
if you have heard it at the time, it might have saved you, right?
It could have. I would say absolutely, because to jump forward to the 21 years and 2021, when we had a typical kind of altercation, just like an argument over something, and like it would happen a lot. It happens a lot. And a lot of times it would come out of nowhere. I wouldn't understand where it came from, or if I asked just a simple question very politely, and that's what took place that day. And on that day, he had a typical response, but this day was different for me. And I had been praying my whole marriage, because unfortunately the infidelity continued. It never stopped for 21 years. It didn't stop. It was something that continued the whole time.
You found that 6 years into the marriage?
6 years was when I had the definite evidence that it had taken place. And then it went on from there. I would find out every couple of years again. I would find out.
What made you stay longer?
So this is the part that many people, it's a good question, Anita. It's one of those things that many people don't understand. I've been asked that question so many times. And I know that if I'm speaking to somebody that's in a relationship with a narcissist in this moment right now, they know that that's actually, it can be very invalidating to, I don't want to say victim. I want to be clear. I don't want to use the term victim, because I won't allow that for me in my life. We are survivors. That's what I say.
We are.
I survived narcissistic abuse. And that's what women are that come through it. We've been victimized, but we are not victims. Amen?
Yeah, I love that.
So the difference is that back then, not knowing any of this information that's out now, I also came from a home with dysfunction. I had a mother that was schizophrenic. And my father was emotionally unavailable. He was the hard worker. He was at work all the time. He was always out working late. He worked very, very hard, which I look back and I thank God that I had a father that at least provided for us. But emotionally, he was not able to be there, understandably. And also his past, the way he grew up too. It wasn't something he learned. Which I find in a lot of people, Gen X, a lot of our generation, so 45 to 63, I believe it is, we grew up in that generation where you didn't talk about things, right? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
Exactly.
And where did that get us, right? We was a whole bunch of us walking around with trauma and this baggage. But
I'm looking for a way to express it, so to get that off your chest,
Yeah, and so if you're not taught how to deal with that, the problem is, for me, and I'm sure a lot of women and men too, because men also go through narcissistic abuse. Many men are.
I mean, it could be a male or female.
Yes, yes. And apparently, statistically, today it's 50-50 now. Oh, wow. It wasn't before. The ratio was higher for men. It is now 50-50, female and male. It's across the board. And they do believe that the social media in the world today, and the way that the world has gone that route, that's what's caused a lot of it. And so
I mean, back in the days, there were no social media. There was no mobile phone.
So for me, why I stayed, and this is going to go back a lot to the church, because I was involved in church very deeply. I taught 2-3 classes a week, sometimes the children's ministry, or volunteered doing other things. My ex-husband's family was very involved in leadership and in the church. And so that's what my life revolved around, and I raised my children in that atmosphere because I wanted that. I always want, because I didn't have that. I didn't become a Christian till I was 24. I had a pretty radical transformation. For me, it was radical. No lights, no thunder, nothing. But internally, right? Internally, it was such a huge transformation for me in my life. So it wasn't something that I was taught that I had to do. It wasn't something ingrained. It was something I wanted to do.
You had a personal, let's say personal encounter with God.
Yes.
And you knew that this is it.
Yes. And I so wanted that peace that I had found, I wanted for my children. So,
and very early too.
Yes.
Not to wait till they're 21 or something.
No, from the time they were in my womb, we went to church. Like we went to church like 2-3 times a week. And so that was a part of it, was that there was a lot of isolation for me. I didn't go out. I didn't have a lot of outside friends. Any friends that I had prior to that, they were within the church. But when you get married and you have kids, you're busy about doing that, right? And so that was part of it. The other thing is that I would say probably the emotional abuse, because that is what's very common with narcissistic abuse. And I just want to say this up front, that to me, psychological and emotional and spiritual abuse is no less important than physical abuse. Physical abuse is a horrible, horrible thing. And a lot of times that can eventually come into the narcissistic relationship, especially when a woman is leaving, she's about to leave. Because for the narcissist, it's all about control. And when they lose that control, or even if they feel they're beginning to lose that control of that person, their behavior starts to escalate. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. So what had happened, why you asked why I stayed so long, I'll try to make it really short. What happens within a narcissistic relationship is there's something called intermittent reinforcement. And what that is when someone is being very sweet to you, very kind to you, love you so much. The world calls the term love bombing. If someone's in that relationship right now, or someone's been researching it, that'll be a term that will sound familiar. So what that is it's an overabundance of affection and attention that you're going to get from this person. And it's hard for people to understand that this is done purposely, not intentionally, but purposely, in order to gain something from their victim or who they are victimizing. Okay, so the other person.
Is it for a short period of time, or for a longer period of time?
Well, the funny thing is, depending how long the woman stays in the relationship or in the marriage, and in my case, it was 21 years. It was a total of 23 years, like being together from the time we got married. So what can happen is the longer the woman stays, there will be a lot of times where, like, it will be intermittent, where they will treat you with the love bombing. They will be kind. They will take you to dinners. They will do all these nice gestures, speak sweet to you, how beautiful you are, and all of these things, right? And then within hours even, something can switch. And the narcissist will begin to display almost a kind of indifference towards
Did you say
the person.
An hour? Not even
It could be within an hour. No, their behaviors are known to be very erratic. And in my experience twice, because unfortunately I've experienced this twice, they change very, very quickly. You've heard the term Jekyll and Hyde, right? It's very much like that. They can be there'll be one person one moment, and then the next moment you're just standing back and you're like, what just happened there?
Yeah, that's going to be difficult to assimilate. Like, you're just showing me love right now, then, you know.
And then, so what happens is they take that back, but you don't see it happening. Because what happens is the first 2 to 3 months, usually when you start a relationship with a narcissist, and maybe this will cover a bit of unmasking and looking for those red flags. Yeah. So in the beginning, the first 2 to 3 months, you're going to be swept off your feet. Many of these types of people, like, you know, there's different subtypes of narcissists, which we won't go into because we don't need to know that, but there's different types. So they may display the behaviors differently, but at the end of the day, they all have the same goal in mind, and that's to hook you. They want you to themselves. They want to hook in, and they're going to do that by giving you a lot of attention and being attentive to your needs, right? This is usually between the first 2 to 3 months, right? And this is why a lot of women and men don't catch it right away, because they think it's the honeymoon. We speak of the honeymoon phase.
Yeah. I mean,
everybody,
right?
Everybody has that. So where is it different? How do we tell the difference between I'm on the honeymoon phase right now or I'm in a relationship with a narcissist? There's one key thing. It's too fast. It will be too fast. They will make gestures. They will say things like, I love you. The word I love you. You know, most people understand that those words, they should take time. That takes time to nurture that and to build that in the relationship, to say I love you. So
From
within
the beginning of the relationship or one? No.
In the beginning, so say a month.
Okay.
I love you so much. I want to marry you. You know, things like, you know, I can't live without you. And another key thing is that's very unhealthy. And this is sometimes just toxic behavior. It's not always a narcissist. It could be someone with just toxic behaviors, clingy. You know, they're looking to be parentified by a woman or vice versa, right? The other thing is they're texting you so much, like you don't get a minute to yourself. Your phone is constantly going off. They're constantly wanting to make contact with you.
And then sometimes when you don't send a reply back or text back, they get offended.
They
not
will.
minding that you might be busy.
Right.
Your phone, it might be called a mobile phone, but at that time, your phone is not with you.
Right.
And so you need time to come back to your phone and respond.
Yes. But the tricky thing is with that, when you're dealing with someone with narcissistic behaviors or narcissistic personality disorder, is that they're not going to show that aggression in the beginning. They're going to hold that all in. But trust me, they're taking notes. When you didn't pick up right away, when you didn't respond right away, when they asked you to bring them something and you didn't bring it because you forgot or you didn't want to bring it. They're keeping a checklist of those things that you're doing in the beginning. Because later down the road, they will eventually come back and they'll bring that back to your memory. They will remember every single thing.
Even something you did like 15 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yes. Yeah, they're a memory bank when it comes to stuff like that because they have a very fragile ego. And I don't want to get too much in depth of the what causes it, but a lot of narcissists that have developed the personality disorder, the clinical term, right? Not people with just high narcissistic traits, because we all have narcissism, right? And some of it's healthy. It's to protect us. So boundaries could be considered narcissistic, but in a healthy way, right? We have to think of ourselves, right? Like God, even Jesus said, right? Love your neighbor as what?
You love
as
yourself.
you love yourself.
So you have to love yourself.
You do
first.
Yes. And so what happens is that in the beginning, they're giving you all this affection, all this attention, and you're going to feel on cloud nine, especially if you didn't get that validation in your childhood.
In your case, you didn't get that.
I did not. I got criticism and I got, neglected and, those kinds of things. So, and that will come into play as well, though, later on in the relationship with a narcissist, because they will start devaluing their partner. They will start criticizing you. They'll make little pokes at what your body looks like or how you speak or what you do. They'll slowly start to break you down. And that is the process from beginning to end. There are 3 stages in the narcissistic relationship. And this is clinical information, but this is information that I can say is true from the experience I've had.
Your personal experience.
Yes. So in the beginning, it was the love bombing, right? All the gifts, the compliments, the kindness, the over-attentiveness, the nonstop texting. And then the next is the devaluing stage. That's when they're going to start testing you and start throwing out little digs or little insults and criticisms, right? And the thing is, this is where the confusion comes for the person, is that they were so good to you for so long, right? They were so kind.
Where's this coming from?
So what's happened is is that when you're receiving this love bombing, when they're being so sweet to you and calling you, telling you how beautiful you are, how much they love you, even though you may feel in the beginning, like in my last situation, I had a relationship and it felt off to me because my ex-husband didn't even do that. My ex-husband did not love bomb me. So there are times where a narcissist may not do the love bombing as much. It'll be more.
Oh, just for clarification,
Yeah.
you said are we talking about two different relationships?
There was two different. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So a year after my divorce, I got involved with somebody else, and it turned out they had the same behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask. Let's take the first stage, which is your husband.
Mm-hmm.
The different things that he did. You talked about him being toxic. You talked about him being abusive. Can you give examples?
Mm-hmm.
Like experiences where he was this, he was that.
Yeah.
And then how you finally got out of the marriage, because a lot of people are stuck right now and they're saying, how do I?
Yes.
So we'll talk about that, and then we'll go to the second.
Right.
The second
Yes.
relationship.
Okay.
So we don't,
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So one of the main traits that my ex-husband had was the silent treatment. And this is where, and I know that if someone's in this relationship right now, they will attest to this. They will know what this is. So it's a form of control and manipulation to get the person to submit to you. So in my situation, when the infidelity would happen, and I always found out, it was never confessed to me. He never came and confessed it. I always found out on my own. So when I would confront him about it, he would first lie, right? He would say, no, I didn't. No, it didn't happen. Then 2-3 days later, he would come and admit it. But he let me believe for 2 or 3 days it didn't happen, and that I must be losing my mind. I must be imagining things here, right? So what had happened is when I would go to confront him about it and try to get an explanation or to understand, why do you keep doing this to me? Because this was every year, every 2 years for 21 years that this went on. I would find out again and again. And I mean,
and you stayed.
I did. And I'm going to tell you the number one reason I stayed, and this is one thing I'm very passionate about that women need to know, is that we have to be so careful who we go to for counsel. Okay? That's very important.
Very, very important.
Okay?
Yeah.
Going to your spouse's family, their family, is not necessarily going to win and help you in your situation. I mean, let's face it, most families, they don't want a family to break up. They don't want their son or their daughter to be divorced. They don't want, sometimes it's reputation. To be honest, people are willing to sacrifice someone's psychological and emotional and spiritual welfare for reputation.
And besides, they're your family, so the first thing they want to do is to protect you first. Right. Irrespective of what's going on. I mean.
But in this case, and I would say to a degree there was a concern for me, but it was more so fixated on him as to try to get him to change and to wake up. Many times the family would reach out to him and they would counsel him. They would try to tell him, what are you doing? You're going to lose your family. Yeah. The reason I kept staying is because of my conviction with God. But it was also the guilt that I didn't want to be the one to break up the family. Yeah. I didn't want.
Sorry to cut you there. I love the fact that you brought up that part that said, where you said that your conviction with God. Because a lot of Christians are in such relationship right now. They clearly need to leave. This is not working. I mean, you just have to leave. But because, divorce is not good. Separation is not good. God hates divorce. But God also hates it when you're dead.
Yes.
So would you rather stay and die or leave?
Yes.
Right. That's where wisdom comes into it, if you ask me, right? Yes. So a lot of people are suffering in silence because, I'm a Christian, I have to stay. No, you don't have to stay.
No. I have a quote that I heard many years ago, before I even started the divorce proceedings. It was a quote, and it said this, and I want every woman and man to listen to this that is in a Christian marriage right now, that if you are going through this, if you are being emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually abused, and you have a feeling they could be narcissistic or just toxic, I want to say this, that God will never honor the institution of marriage more than the individuals in it.
That's the word. Yeah. Very key.
When I read that, even years before I had left, it always stuck at the back of my mind. And of course, as time went on, that would just keep resonating with me, you know, because
your life it's so important to God.
It is. And here's the thing, is that it began to affect my ministry, my life with God, because I was becoming depressed. I was in oppression. I was being oppressed. And so, you know, there were many days I didn't want to get out of bed. I would just be so psychologically broken and emotionally broken. But God was always there. That's the good thing. And I want to encourage people today that you may not have a lot of friends around. You may feel isolated, because that's one thing narcissists do as well. They will isolate you from your family. They will do it insidiously. And your friends, especially if your friends are questioning what's going on in your marriage or your relationship. They don't want you to be aware, because my favorite thing is knowledge is power. Soon as you have knowledge, you have power. They don't want you to have that. They want to keep you suppressed, right? And so that's what I encourage people to remember, is that if anything takes you away from God, if anything is taking you away from God, number one, it's become an idol. Okay, and this is where I took my responsibility. Looking back now, I realize I also had my part in it. I had to realize I was making this person an idol. Why? Because I allowed him to take me from my time with God. It was beginning to oppress me. It was beginning to bring depression. Therefore, I was not functional for God. You know, we think of other things like alcohol or drugs, or, you know, not even substance abuse. It could be anything. It could be money. It could be anything. We wouldn't allow those things. We see it. We can see it clearly. You're drinking, like you need to stop drinking. It's coming in between your relationship with God. God don't want you for this. The problem with narcissistic abuse, it's done behind closed doors. And many narcissists are known for wearing a mask.
So he's a different person inside, and he's a different person outside. And because he or she had isolated you from your friends and family, when he's a different person, a nice person outside, then you had the opportunity to like tell them, this is what this person is like. That's not possible.
Right.
It can't be him. It can't be her. No, but he's this nice and wonderful guy, right? So it's difficult for them to understand, believe, and process.
Right. And then that invalidates the person even more, because they're like, well, I can't tell anybody because they're not going to believe me. So what do? We hold it in, and we don't talk to anybody. And the days and the weeks and the months and the decades go by. There are many women and men that have been in these marriages or relationships for years, for decades.
They want to leave, but they can't leave because of things like this.
Yes. And a lot of the thing is too, it is a lack of knowledge. It's because they don't know. But I am so thankful to God that the information that is out there, even though some of it may be taken out of context, is that if it's setting people free, like it did for me, if it's opening people's eyes to say, you know what? No, this isn't right. This doesn't feel good. And it will impact your children as well. It impacts our children. They are victimized just as much as we are. And because they're so young, like in my case, I did not know about narcissism until 2021. It sounds crazy, but I tell you, I didn't know.
And that was when you were about to leave.
Yeah, I thought it was just selfish people. They are very selfish, but there's so much more.
You didn't know there was a temp for them, you know, like
Yeah.
Okay, who would have thought?
Yes.
When we come back, I'm going to ask you to tell us more, expatiate on the different things that you suffered in the hands of your ex-husband, and then we'll move into the new partner after you
Yes.
left, and finally the red flags.
Okay.
Now back to your ex-husband. Can you point out the different things that he was doing or he did to you that got to you after like 21? Did you say 21 years?
21 years.
21 good years. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. I don't know how you managed to stay that long, but I'm glad you're out. So can you tell us what are the different things that you went through? You talked about him cheating every 2 years. Every 2 years for 21 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more other things that he was doing? You did say he was toxic, he was abusive.
Yes.
Just expatiate on those, and then we'll talk about how you finally got the courage to leave.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of the behaviors were unpredictable. That was the part, was you were walking on eggshells a lot. So he would come home from work, and it was more of his way of thinking was he went to work for 8 hours in his shift. And when he would come home, dinner would be ready, the kids would be doing their homework, and he didn't have to worry about anything. I did take care of pretty much everything, the finances, the kids, the homework, all those things. And when he would come home and you could feel the tension in the house. Like there were many times I would just hear the car pull in the driveway and I would jump. I would start to get, like my nervous system would get activated. And I would catch myself getting up if I was sitting down just for a moment, either on the phone talking to someone or if I was watching TV or something, I would jump and get up and start to like find something to do. Wow. And I've only realized that in the last few years since I started my healing journey, since I left. I realized looking back, and as I've learned about narcissism, I've learned how they programmed you. So he programmed me in different ways, and that was one of them. Just his presence alone, it was a superiority. It was like a very strong presence. And it wasn't all the time. There were again times where he would be gentle and he would be sweet, or he would just be quiet. He wouldn't talk. So if I asked something that he didn't want to talk about, what he would do is he would begin to raise his voice. And my kids were always home. And I didn't want my children to grow up the way I did. So I grew up in a home where there was a lot of arguing, yelling, screaming, fighting between my parents. And I always said that I didn't want my kids to be around that. And because I was a Christian and knowing the Word of God and loving God the way that I did, that's the main reason. I wanted peace in my home. I wanted to have a home that was built on peace. And so, but that's what he would do. So if I asked a question, let's say in regards to the infidelity, because the woman that this happened with over those years was a woman from work. It happened at work. It wasn't, as far as I know, multiple people, but it was always that woman. It was an affair basically that went on for the whole marriage. They worked together. And so what had happened is if I would just bring it up randomly, say 6 months, a year later, and I would just ask, I'd be like, do you still see her at work? Do you run into each other? It was met with aggression and passive aggressiveness and anger. And his response would be, do you want to start something? Do you want to start with me? You want to start a fight? Wow. And so right away, over the years, he programmed me to just be silent. I would then at that point just let it go. I would just calm down and I would just be quiet. I would stop. I wouldn't ask no more questions. Wow. And that took years because in the beginning I would speak my mind. Like I'm a strong woman. Yeah. I wasn't a weak woman. A lot of people think that women or men that get into these relationships or that get married in these situations are weak, maybe not very smart, very naive. That's not the case because as I'll explain later in the next relationship I got into, you are sometimes dealing with people that are very coercive and very manipulative. And in the beginning, like I said, they're not showing you who they are because everyone knows if I showed you my rotten self right up front, you're never going to talk to me again. Right? So this is what happens is it was a method of breaking me down and keeping me silent because he knew I didn't want the kids to hear things. He knew that I didn't want that in the home. And so he knew if he just raised his voice a little, I would come down,
back down
and I'd become silent.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only was I dealing with the pain of the infidelity, I was dealing with the pain of holding all of that in and not getting answers or not feeling validated or that he even cared. And so I just started to become a shell. I just became a shell. I would do the things I had to do. And another thing that he did, and a lot of narcissists do this, is a silent treatment that I spoke about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So the last weekend, I'll give the example of the weekend that I had decided to leave,
Mm-hmm.
where I'd come to a place where after 21 years, I will tell you how I came to the place of getting out. So what had happened was I had asked him for the first time in a long time if the woman was even still working at the place that he worked at. His response was very sarcastic. He was a very sarcastic man. He was sarcastic to our children too. And this morning, that day, it was Family Day weekend 2021. I'll never forget it. And just like any other time I would ask him, he would get angry, he'd get agitated. He didn't like being questioned, and no narcissist, no toxic person does. They don't want to talk about it because it brings shame, and shame is one of the number one
also
things.
because they're guilty.
Yes, and that's why. So because they know they're guilty, they don't want the shame to come on them. They will do anything to avoid shame because that is the basis of their character, is from shame. So at that point, I'd asked him, but for the first time in 21 years, I didn't react. I stayed quiet, and he was sarcastic. He made a sarcastic comment. And I just looked at him, and I go, "What did you just say?" And he expressed it again. And then I said to him, I said, "I'm just asking you a question. I'm not yelling. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just asking because I want to know. I'm just asking, does she still work there?" At that point, he got up and he started fidgeting around the house, and with the vacuum and things were just, he was in another world. And I had felt at that point, something's going on still. I don't know what it is, but at this point, I didn't care anymore. I didn't care.
21 years, you've had enough.
Yeah, it's like I'm now at my breaking point. And I mean, I'm strong, I can take a lot, but you've been programmed to take it, right? You become a shell of yourself. You lose yourself. If you ever hear someone say that in their narcissistic relationship that they lost a part of themselves, 100%, because they will take your light. I call them energy vampires sometimes because they will suck the energy out of you. And it's not bad energy, because the funny thing is they were attracted to you in the first place because of your light, because of your good energy. And it's not about me or the person that was victimized being innocent. We're not perfect. We need the grace of God too. But it's your character. It's the soul of you, that you don't like to hurt people, that you have remorse, that you can show empathy. And that's another thing narcissists cannot do. They cannot show empathy. If they do, they call it goal empathy. Goal empathy is they'll put tears, they will cry, they will say all the right things in the moment, but that's to get supply from you. That's because they want something from you. Otherwise, they could stand and watch you cry for hours and not even be moved. It's actually quite eerie sometimes. So what happened was, when he began to do that, I sat on the couch, I just watched. And this is where the typical silent treatment came in. What he did is a long weekend, it was Family Day weekend. He went downstairs at one point. He said, "I'm not dealing with this on my weekend off." He went downstairs, and he only came up those 3 days just to go to the washroom. He never came up. He stayed in the basement. And that was how he gave me the silent treatment over those years. He would disappear and go to another room and not talk to me, not talk to our children, because he didn't just punish me, he punished our children as well.
And you are all in the same house?
Yes. Yeah, but you felt like a stranger most of the time. Like, I didn't feel like a married woman. I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like a mom, because my boys were my life. And I did protect them a lot from a lot of things, because he was also abusive to them too, emotionally. And so what I did is, at that point, It was Saturday night. By the end of the night, I was waiting for the text. And in the past, I would chase him. And this is the goal of the silent treatment. They want you to chase them, to beg them for their attention. But at this point now, I'm done. Like, I just can't do it no more. Like, I'm dried up. The desert is dry. There's nothing there. I don't even think by 2021, I think it'd been a couple of years, I didn't even cry. Like, I couldn't even cry anymore. So at that point, Saturday night came around and I'm just like, is this the way it's going to be for the rest of my life? If I'm here another 25, 30 years, is this what it's going to be like? What happens if I ever get cancer? What if I get sick? Is he going to be able to be there for me?
How is he going to love you, care for you?
Yeah, and it wasn't there. And actually, when I had discovered the first time I discovered he was having the affair was when I was laid up in bed. I had jaw surgery. I had major jaw surgery. My mouth was wired shut, and it was 6 weeks. And it was that time that I found out that he was cheating on me. And yeah, it was a horrible thing. I was dealing with the healing and with 3 boys under 7 and finding out that he had been cheating on me for a while. I found a different phone. I found different things in the trunk of his car, and I knew. And when I confronted him, he didn't admit it in the beginning, but later on he ended up confessing it. And at that point, that was the first time. And but that's what happened in the beginning. I was sick.
Yeah.
And there were many times when I really, really needed him, he could not be there for me. He would either start an argument about something silly so that we would end up fighting, and then he could use that as his excuse to not be there. They do that as well, right? So at this point, back to the night that the weekend I decided to leave, that night, I just Googled, and I know everybody says, oh no, not Dr. Google, but I didn't have anyone to talk to. And
you've been isolated from your friends
I
and
was,
family.
and even social media, I was doing fitness coaching at the time. So my algorithms, I never got anything on narcissism or anything like that, because that's not what I was doing, right? So I Googled, why do men give the silent treatment? That was it. After about 2-3 hours of researching and just going through, narcissism popped up.
Wow.
And I just started going down a rabbit hole. And at that point, I would say I remember being up really late that night. It was probably 2-3 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep. It was like I had this revelation. It was like my eyes had been opened, and I couldn't believe it. And it's still to this day, sometimes when I look back and think of how it all was unraveled, it's crazy that Google, just a simple search, ended up just opening this Pandora's box, and I learned what I was in. And that's when I said,
because nobody else could have told you.
No,
right?
no, because even if they had told me about narcissism, I may not have still understood it. But the fact that I spent all these hours that weekend, that day, reading up on it and everything, and that's when I came across Dr. Ramani. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's a psychologist that talks a lot about narcissism. Like, I just kept delving deeper and deeper, and I was like, yes, oh my gosh, yes, the silent treatment. Oh my goodness, the arguments, the gaslighting, you know, like he would do stuff like this too. This is another part of the abuse is, you know, I would just finish cleaning the kitchen, and it sounds so simple. Like, the ordinary person will be like, well, so what? He made a mess. But there would be instances where he knew what I didn't like, and he knew if I was tired, because I worked as well outside the home, but I was still doing everything else. If I came home and I just finished cleaning the kitchen, let's just say, he would go in and he would pull things out, and he wouldn't put it back on purpose.
Wow.
The thing is, people make messes, people don't pick up after themselves, but then there are those that do it intentionally
And
to get a reaction.
continuously.
Yes, continuously. This went on for years. And I remember one day I had just, you know, I was like, I'm going to watch what he does. And I saw him pulling all this stuff out in the kitchen, and I saw him get a dish out. And I remember I'm just going to ask him. But I had saw what he did with my own eyes. And I remember I went downstairs and I go, did you just pull these glasses out? They were drinking glasses. He's like, no. And he's in the other room. He can't see me because there's a wall dividing the living room from the kitchen. And I said, are you sure? And my kids weren't around. And he's like, yeah, I'm sure. And I'm like, but I saw him do it.
Mhm.
Now, I didn't know about narcissism yet at that time, so I didn't know that was gaslighting,
Mhm.
right? They make you think you're going crazy, that
Yeah.
you're seeing things. And I remember like how frustrated I would get inside. I'd be like,
I just saw you.
like, how can he lie to me? But I wouldn't say anything because by that point, he had me trained to be quiet, right? And then I remember at one point, I said, why are you lying? And he got upset and he raised his voice, started raising his voice. And it was, do you want to start? That was his favorite line. You want to start something? Do you want to start something? And so right away, I was just like, whatever. And I let it go. But when I discovered the narcissism and I read all these different things, I was just like, oh my goodness, it's right there.
Right,
This is
yeah.
what I've been living for 23 years. I've been living with this. And, you know, and there will be sometimes certain things, some narcissists won't do certain things that other narcissists will. There are some different traits they can have. Some may have the 9, some may have 6, some may do it differently. But at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. And so what had happened was when I discovered all of this that night, I had realized, I was like, I've got to get out and I got to get my kids out because he was gaslighting them. He was emotionally abusing them as well. He was sarcastic. He could never, you know, do the things that a father would do. He couldn't hug them. He never hugged them, never told them he loved them unless I told him to do it. It was very hard for him. And that's a part of the narcissism as well. And so I remember that weekend, he stayed downstairs the whole time. I don't even think he came up to eat that whole weekend.
Wow.
And it was very strange. But I was used to it. But now that I'm reading about the narcissism, I'm like, okay. And you just start flashing back and things just start making sense. And you're like, wow, okay, it's not me. Because I used to think I was going crazy.
Yeah, they make you think that you're actually going crazy, right?
Like I thought, oh my goodness, like maybe
I'm
I'm
the
like my
problem.
mother. Maybe I'm schizophrenic. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And I remember I actually at one point in the marriage, I had gone to see a psychologist and I had talked to her. And she said, the fact that you're here and you're asking me that, she goes, I know, she goes, you're not. She goes, you've adapted behavior patterns by living with somebody like this. So, because that's what can happen too, is that you can actually, the survivor at some point can actually begin to pick up some of the narcissistic traits. And, you know, but you won't recognize it.
I mean,
right?
after living with them for that long.
Yeah, you know, the Bible says bad company corrupts good character.
Yeah.
There's lots of scriptures that speak about that. And so at this point, it came to Monday night of the long weekend, and he was on his way to work on night shift. He came downstairs. By this point, it was just amazing. It was because for 21 years, I went back and forth to leave. We did even separate at one point for 1 year. We were separated for a whole year.
Oh, wow.
And I took him back because he made promises to change and all of these other things. And so, but at this point in 2021, it was almost like something was cut. It was like God just cut it. It was just cut.
Whatever it was that was tying you to him.
Yeah, there was no emotion. I didn't even cry. I felt freedom. I felt excited that I finally understood what I was dealing with, that it wasn't me. It was like, this is actually a thing. And so what had happened was he came down and he would do what he would usually do. He would raise his voice kind of like, Billy, where are you? And I was in the bedroom at the time. It was just a level down in the house. And he's like, okay, you want to talk now? It was always on his schedule. And I thought, 3 days, you haven't even come upstairs and you're barking at me to talk. I'm like, okay. But I was prepared because of what I had learned.
Yeah.
So I learned about the control and everything. So at that point, I came downstairs. We sat on the couch. He was about to leave. And he's like, yeah, I know that I shouldn't have been sarcastic to you. He's saying like what he's sorry for. Like he always did. He would come and apologize after not talking to me for days. Then he'd come and talk to me when he was ready. But that silent treatment was for a reason. He was programming me at the time in the silence. But then I remember he said, but, and this is one thing you got to know. Whenever someone apologizes to you and they throw a but in there, it's not an apology. It's not an apology. It's not a true apology.
Yeah.
And so when he said that to me, he goes, but you know, I worked overtime, I was tired, you shouldn't have asked me these questions, you asked me
That's not an
this,
excuse.
right? It's like he did not want to be accountable for all of the infidelity he had done in the marriage. And a lot of times in narcissistic relationships, there is no accountability. They cannot be accountable, because if they admit they did something wrong, then that means they're guilty. And if they're guilty, then the shame comes, and they cannot handle shame. Shame is like, this may sound like a terrible analogy, but shame is like light to a cockroach. They can't stand it. They cannot handle it. And there's reasons for that, which I'll talk about in a bit. But at that point, I said to him, I said, okay, thank you for apologizing. And at that point, I said to him, I said, I want a divorce.
Just straight up.
Straight up, I want a divorce. And he looked at me and he was in shock, because I never used that word. We would separate. When we were separated, I never used the word divorce, because I was always hopeful. You're always hopeful, and they leave you hopeful. They'll give you little breadcrumbs to keep you hope, right? And as a believer, you always have hope. God is your hope. That God created marriage. God brought this man in my life, and he's going to make it work. But God is a God of free will, and he doesn't force anybody to change.
He doesn't.
And there comes the point you have to accept they are not going to change.
And you have to love yourself
first.
first.
You do.
Choose yourself.
You have to choose yourself. And see, I was never raised like that, because I was not like that with my mother. I was codependent with my mother. I was like her surrogate mother. I took care of her, even at the end, in her older age. I took care of her. I was her primary caregiver. And so what happened is you begin to pick up that character, that personality, that trait of codependency. You're like that with every relationship later in your life. You feel like it's your job to fix this person, or you want to change them. And if I could tell any woman this right now, young or old, the moment you realize and accept that you can't change people, that is when your freedom will come. That's when freedom comes. And so for me, in that moment, there was no emotion, because I realized, oh my goodness, like I've been basically just kicking a dead horse, that this was not going to change. And if I stayed, I would either completely walk away from God, or I would end up dead, or I would have heart problems, because heart disease ran in my family as it was. And the stress, and a lot of it came from trauma for the women in my family. They experienced CPTSD growing up, and both my mom and her sister had died from heart attacks.
And you just don't want that to happen to you.
Yeah. And so, you know, there comes a time in our life where God will protect us. And I absolutely believe in the healing power of God. And I also believe that God allows us the free will to choose the right thing.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I did. And from that moment, the divorce began. And it took about 7 months. He would not leave the house. He refused to leave the house. It took about 7 months to come to an agreement. And in that time, there was a lot of chaos in the home. It was not a good situation. It was very, very difficult to keep standing my ground.
But your mind was made up, and you needed to stand your ground. Okay.
Yes. And he was trying to change that. And this is a very important part that I need to speak about, is that in an attempt to save the marriage, to keep me from leaving, he went for an assessment. And that assessment, he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So there was actually evidence of it. Because I know a lot of people say, well, how do you know? Or, you know, you can't go around diagnosing people. But here's what I say to that. I had already known he had it by the information I had read, because I got the knowledge. You have to get knowledge. Is that I already knew what I was in. I knew for sure he was either really, really highly narcissistic, or he had NPD. Did it really matter? This is what I say to people. Does the diagnosis really matter at the end of the day? If they are harming you intentionally, personally and purposely, if they are gaslighting you, if they are criticizing you, putting you down, either in front of your kids or even if you're alone, if they are cheating on you, that is sexual abuse. In my eyes, if a man is continually sleeping with other people, or he's sleeping with someone else, and then he's coming home to his wife, that is sexual abuse. Because you can get STDs, you can end up with cervical cancer, you can get all kinds of things, and people don't realize this. It's not just infidelity, and this is why I believe it's one of the 10 commandments.
There's also a spiritual there's also a spiritual aspect to it, not just
Absolutely.
Physical.
Yes.
You know, you
There's
might not even have the STDs and all that, but there's a spiritual implication.
Yes. And if people are familiar with the term soul ties or trauma bond, the spiritual side of it is the part that really resonated with me, because as a believer, I understood the authority I had in Christ. I understood that there are entities and principalities and powers and rulers in darkness that we don't fight against, that are there, we cannot see. And when somebody is sexually active outside of the marriage, this is why God said it is one of the commandments, the 10 commandments, and it's because you are attaching yourself spiritually to those people. So whatever is in them is going to come to you now. And so this is what was happening. This is where my depression, oppression, all this stuff was coming from, what he was doing outside as well. Not just the emotional abuse in the home, but what he was doing outside of the home.
As well.
It's very serious. It's not just sleeping with somebody. And Christians need to understand that this is where I realized that was a part of the reason I had peace about leading the marriage, because I knew that he was spiritually destroying my life. Right.
So if I may come in there, so it's not enough for you to cheat and come back and say, I'm so sorry, you know, I did that, and then let's go back to life as normal. You know, one time is bad enough.
And that's what he wanted. He wanted it to be brushed under the rug and to just keep living this happy life, going to church every week, dressing the kids up. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah.
Do all of that and still go to church. My goodness.
It's
I choose that.
You know, I say it was the grace of God, where he says his grace is sufficient.
I mean, not you. I mean, how does he do all these things in the house, he would treat you that way, and still go to church like nothing happened, like everything is all right, and smile and praise the Lord and read the Bible. Oh my goodness.
And so it's a very difficult thing for the survivor to walk through, because there's also spiritual abuse. And what can happen is a leadership in the church even, and this is where I hope things change. My prayer is that leadership in churches will begin to understand narcissism, that they will begin to call it what it is and to deal with it, not just emotionally and psychologically, but spiritually. You know, and I don't know if this may be the right time to interject this, but I want to say this. I have no anger or unforgiveness toward my ex-husband. In fact, the forgiveness, it came pretty quick for me because I had been wanting to go for a long time. I had been unhappy. Getting that answer gave me some peace. It helped me to forgive him, because what I want to say is this, is that, but this can't be misconstrued to have sympathy for them. I want to make that clear too. Don't have sympathy for them, because it's a choice. Again, they make the choice to stay where they are. So, but the thing is, these people are the way they are because of a trauma in their life at some point that they've gone through. They didn't ask for it to happen, right? No child asks to be abused. But there are cases where men have not had traumatic childhoods and they are narcissists. Everyone believes all the time a narcissist comes from trauma. It has not been proven. It has been proven that sometimes they don't even have to grow up in a traumatic childhood, that they can have it without that. So I think that it's important to realize that yes, they may have had a traumatic childhood, like most of us have. I mean, I did, but I didn't turn out like that, right? I think we need to the church especially needs to understand that this is something deeper and it's spiritual. And these people need deliverance. Yeah. They need deliverance. But the thing is, the key is they have to want the deliverance.
Yeah, you can't force it on anyone.
No. And, so.
Yeah, so talking about the church, did you ever go to the church to explain what's going on in your home? And what happened? What did they do?
Yeah, so the first church that I went to, when it was brought to their attention, there was maybe 2 counseling sessions, and they were privately done. So it was done with me alone, and then it was done with my ex-husband at the time, with the pastor. And it was basically, appreciate what you have. You have a good wife. She takes care of your children. She's a good mother. Like, stop it. Mm-hmm. Like, it was like a slap on the wrist, right? Go home and make it right. Well, a narcissist doesn't know how to make it right. Mm-hmm. You're just sending them back into the fire, right? And we're going to get burned. The survivor's going to get burned more now. Why? Because now you told on them. Yeah. You exposed them. And they don't like being exposed. That's their worst fear, is people to find out who they really are. So that was the other part that keeps you stuck so long, is that you can't tell people. You're scared to tell people because they're not going to believe you. Yeah. Because everyone sees bruises. When someone's being physically abused, they see the bruises, the scars, the marks. And believe me, I'm not minimizing physical abuse. It's domestic abuse. It's domestic violence. It's all horrible. But you see that, but you cannot see the psychological scars or the emotional scars or the spiritual scars that they're causing.
Someone actually said those are the worst kind of scars or the worst kind of abuse because you don't see evidence, right?
Right. And I've heard that many times. And then at the same time, I want to be very careful because I don't want to invalidate people of physical abuse. But most people that are being physically abused, which narcissists are capable of, they tend to be higher on the spectrum, like more of a sociopath, the ones that can become physical. But they're usually being emotionally and psychologically abused as well as physical. So it is difficult. It's hard because you want to reach out, you want to tell people. And both times I expressed it to 2 different pastors in 2 different churches, it was more of marital counseling. It was marital counseling. It wasn't for abuse. They couldn't see it. And I don't blame them because they couldn't see it because I didn't know what it was. How can I explain what I don't know? And this is my heart and passion, to get this out, to share and talk about my story. Because if just one person who's stuck where I was can hear and understand and get that knowledge of what they're really dealing with, and they can become free, then it's worth it all. It's all worth it. And at the end of the day, someone asked me, did God tell you to leave? Was it God's will for you to divorce? And I remember the first time someone asked me that, it was sort of condemning. I felt it was a condemnation, but it could have been just me. It could have been my own conscience. Like, I did feel bad that I had to break up my family. Nobody wants to divorce. Yeah. Nobody wants that. And after 21 years, that was the last thing I wanted, right? Especially for my children, because I know what it was like to come from a home there was a divorce. I came from that too. So I didn't want that. But at the end of the day, God didn't tell me to divorce. God didn't, send this message to me audibly or even in my soul, in my spirit, where I hear from God. I see it like this. It was a bird cage. And I'm going to try not to get emotional here, but it's like being in a bird cage. What God did was he opened the door. He didn't tell me to come out.
You make the decision, stay or leave.
And he didn't close the door. He just opened it. The prison door's been open. Are you going to go or are you going to stay? It was my choice. Yeah. And I chose to go. I choose to leave that cage.
And in this case, I want to validate that it was a good choice. Yeah. Someone said to me many years ago, God did not give us brain to be stupid. He gave you brain to think. Yes. And think what is good for you at that moment.
Yes.
Now, so you got the courage to finally leave. And then a few months later or a few years later, you ended up with another. Oh my goodness, tell us about that, just in a few words.
I'll say this, and this is a part of the red flags, which I'll talk about after, but the one thing, looking back now, that I would change is if I have any major life events going on in my life, you don't make any decisions. Mm-hmm. Don't ever make decisions. And especially for women or men that are just recently out of a marriage or divorce, do not get into a relationship. Your guard is down, you're vulnerable, you're lonely, and this is the place I was when the next person came into my life. I had I think it was like 5 major life events in a matter of 8 months. So I went through divorce, lost the house, moved to a new city, started a new career, and then my mother died, all within 7-8 months. And so when I met that person, I was not in the right space. In my mind, my heart, my spirit, I was not in the right place. I was still walking with God. The whole time I was getting stronger with God. And at that time, I was actually pursuing God. I was reading the word, I was praying, and I was just telling God, like, just heal me. I knew I needed healing. I needed healing after my divorce. And so I was working on that healing journey. And then this person came into my life. And everything changed from that moment. And this is where, when you have different types of people with those personality traits, like narcissistic, there are different types of them. They're not all going to be the same. My ex-husband and this person were very different. His approach, this other person that I had just met, his approach was very different. Very, very attentive, very complimenting, nonstop texting, calling, it was over the top. I had never ever experienced that in my life, ever. And I mean, this is the second man in my life in 28 years. And I hadn't been single for 26 years. So I'm new to this and I didn't know what to expect. I don't know what kind of world is out there now because I've been isolated for so many years, right? And so when I met this man, because all of these things were going on in my life at the time, my guard was down. I was longing for connection, not with a man necessarily, just connection with people, someone to see me. I wanted to, feel connection with a human being because I hadn't had it for 24, 25 years. I lived in a marriage that was marriageless, if that makes sense, right? It wasn't a marriage. And this person came in and said just all the right things. And, a lot of people say to me, they're like, yeah, but you didn't see that as a red flag that, he's so No, I loved it. Come on, right? Like, who's not going to love a man who's telling you how gorgeous you are?
From after many years.
After coming out of something like that, my ex-husband never told me or complimented me, and he did that purposely to keep me down. So here's this man over in abundance, and it's like, wow, like, this is amazing, like dopamine big time, right? He worked out like I thought, oh, he's fit like me because I love the gym, I work out, I take care of myself. I'm like, this is like, wow, God, did you just hand this to me in a basket? Right? It's like, oh my goodness. And so, it went so fast. It was like the intimacy, everything. It was like, it started so quick for me. And I was like, whoa, like, I gotta slow down here. Like, whoa, what am I doing? But then he wouldn't let up. It was just like, it's like being pulled on a rope. He just kept
How long
pulling.
were you guys, how long were you together? And how long did it take you to realize this is what it is? Or this is what he's doing?
I'm embarrassed to answer this because, and I'm smiling, but inside it was very traumatic. Like, it's very serious. I've just gotten out of it, I would say just months ago. I was finally able to just cut it. And it sounds terrible, but I literally, like, I feel like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when he stomped on the serpent's head. It felt like that. He's a viper. He was a viper. It was like, but I didn't see it. I'd say probably between the 8 to 12 month mark was when I started picking up No, it was sooner than that. Okay, so yeah, there was times in the beginning, I would say around month 4 or 5 was when he started to get short with me, or he would make jokes and say, like, he'd make an insult and then say, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Don't be so sensitive, right? This is where my ex wasn't so much like that, my ex-husband. This guy was different this way. No man had ever insulted me like this and made it like a joke. And I said, no, that's not funny. I said, that's not a joke, because I'm not laughing. I said, you're insulting me. What if I did that to you? Then he stopped doing that because he saw that I wouldn't tolerate that. So I was like, okay. And then there was one episode one night where he got very angry at me over something I told him that happened in my life years ago. And he raged. And I had never experienced this before. But he had started, like, literally yelling at me in my face. And he was a big man, and he was loud, and it really, really, I froze. I froze in the moment because I didn't know what to do. I'd never seen that side yet. And I'd say that was month 5 or 6. And at that point, I was just like, you need to go home. Like, I'm going home. Like, I don't know what just happened there, but I couldn't even talk. Like, I was just almost like I was frozen. And I don't know if it was fear, probably fear, or just shock. And so I ended up leaving. I went home. And then, of course, the next day, apology, hundreds of text messages, love songs, all kinds of stuff. I love you so much, Billy. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I'm just a jealous guy. I get jealous. You should know I get jealous. Wow. You know, I just really love you. And to think that that happened to you and all of this. And the craziest thing was, and it happened a few other times after this, it kept happening, is I began to believe what he was telling me. I was reasoning what he was telling me. It was like, okay, that must make sense. And then there were a couple of times where it was threatening physical behavior. It was like, it scared me to the point, like, is he going to hit me? And at that point, that's when, in the criticisms, I started to think, what is this? Now, I was still researching narcissism at the time. I was still researching it and learning about it because I'm on my healing journey, not realizing I'm in the midst of another one again. And so it was stagnating my healing. Then I started pulling away from God. I started compromising my faith and my values. And that's another red flag, is that when you start to compromise your values and your morals and you start pulling from God, that should have been to me like, whoa, wait a second, this is not good. But I overlooked it because I started to love this person. I started to care for them. And so I wasn't going to just abandon it. I was like, no. And I believed that God was going to save him. I was being a martyr. And I realized, probably I would say for sure, around the 8-month mark, I started realizing, oh my goodness, I think this man is a narcissist. I think it's another narcissist, just a different type, like very overt, very grandiose, and just, you know, and my ex-husband wasn't like that. My ex-husband was very quiet and stayed in the background. This person was different. So that's why I didn't see it, because I didn't understand the different types. I didn't know the different types of traits and behaviors. So that's what had happened. It was like probably around the 8-month mark, I started researching it. And I even told him, I said, I think you're a narcissist. The things you do and the things that you behave like, there's something here that's not right. And he was even open to it a couple of times and was like, yeah, I've been told that before. And and then so the worst part was, it was Father's Day weekend, 2023. And he came to my house and I ended up buying him some desserts and a Father's Day card. And he came over to my house and we had dessert or whatever, and we were talking. And I'm fully invested in this relationship. Like, I've been loyal. I like gave him everything. I was cooking meals for him. I was like...
You were not married, were you?
I acted like I was his wife, 100%. And he told me this night, he's like, I have something to tell you. And I asked him, I said, oh. He goes, yeah, it's time I tell you. Well, my stomach just dropped to the floor. I felt like I was going to be sick. And I said, what is it? And he said, you know how I told you I live with my parents? I said, yes. He goes, I don't live with my parents.
What?
And I said, who do you live with? And he goes, my wife.
What?
Yeah. So I remember I was speechless. And I'm not speechless very often. I couldn't speak. And my kids were in their room. They were upstairs. And I'm just like, this is a nightmare. This is not happening. I was in denial. Like I couldn't believe that this had gone on for a whole year. A whole year.
You guys were together for 1 year?
We've been together over 2 years because I ended up going back after I found that out. I still went back. And there's a whole bunch to that. This may have to be a 5-part series.
I know, right?
Because
part 2, part 2, part 3.
Yes.
Because all these things need to be said. People need to learn. People need to know.
Yes. Yeah. And the fact that he was able to pull that off so meticulously, I couldn't get my head around it. I thought this
Did you ever visit his house?
So he had told me, so his mother was Italian. His parents were older, obviously. He was an older man. Like, you know, I'm in my 50s. And he had told me his mom was old school. He's like, you know, I just want to make sure that we're really, really, you know, like everything is solid before I introduce you to my parents. Because I was starting to ask him, I've introduced you to my children 6 months in. When am I going to meet your parents and your family? And he'd be like, well, you know, my mom's really just, you know, old school. And I fight with my dad all the time. And my dad's just going to embarrass me. So he had a lot of complications with his dad. And he was like, I don't want to bring you over because, you know, my dad's going to, you know, embarrass and humiliate me in front of you. I just don't want to deal with it. So I would drop him off at his house. And never, like, I've not dated for over 25 years, 26 years. This man's older. Like, I'm now, you know, 30 years older dating. I'm thinking at this age, we're mature. Everybody knows what they want in their life. And, you know, who would do such a thing? And so when I found out, I was done. At that point, I was done. I was like, just leave. Like, I'm done. And 3 days later, so there's a term they use for narcissists that get people to try to rope you back in. It's not a nice term. It's called flying monkeys. It's a term that psychologists use where the narcissist will get friends and family of theirs they'll tell them, you know, they'll twist the story of how things are, and then they'll get them to start trying to talk to you to hoover you back in, to get you to come back. How are you going to get
you back when he's married? I don't get that part.
So he had moved out. So he told me he moved out of his parents around month 9 or 10, that he had moved in with another relative. And I'd gone to that relative's place. He introduced me finally around 10 months to that relative. And I saw his stuff there. I would see his shoes and his clothes there. But he told me it's because he was fighting nonstop with his dad, that he had moved out because he was having conflict with his dad too much. So that's what he had told me. So I'm thinking, like, there's a couple of things here when he's telling me this, and I'm trying to line things up. And I'm like, so you're not fighting with your dad. And so, okay, so you moved out of your house and your wife. And I was like, does your wife know about this? And he said, yes. And so...
He's not making sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And this is the part that took me, that's where the confusion came. And especially when he got his family involved and friends calling me and telling me how much he loved me. Don't do this, give him a chance. He left his wife for you. He did all these things. And it's like, is anyone talking about the fact that almost a whole year I didn't know I was with a married man? Does anybody care how I feel about that? Nobody did. And again, just like in my marriage, nobody's focusing on what the actual truth is and what they did. They're focusing on that person, and it's either sympathy for them or it's this delusion of they're the victim, because that's what narcissists do too. They play the victim. They will twist the story so that you'll feel sorry for them. So his pity was, I lost my wife in my house for this woman. So I can't leave. I owe him something because he left his wife for me when I didn't even know it was happening. So it's it's crazy. So thankfully, the one thing I gotta do is I gotta give glory to God, because of God, I had created a very strong bond, toxic bond with this man, worse, I think, some days than before with my ex. And it was hard to break because of the situation that I was in. And because of that, it took me so long to get out. I would leave, go back. And this is something that is a red flag. If you find yourself leaving.
And I think it's common with a lot of people too.
Yes. And
you wonder, why do you keep going back?
Yeah. So if you're going back and leaving, know that you are being manipulated. You are being coercively controlled. And that is abuse. And you have to get out. Because otherwise, you can get to a point where you'll never get out.
I think this is the right time to tell us about those red flags.
Yes.
So let's look at it in three different ways, or three different parts. The first part would be those people who are not in a relationship yet, right? And who want to get into the relationship. What are the red flags that they need to look out for?
So some of the things, the first thing I talked about earlier is over attentive to you. This is a part of the calibration phase that they're going to do with every victim. This is what they do. And it's all planned, is over attentive. So also breaking boundaries. So if you have to get to work the next day and you're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they don't have to, and they're calling you at like midnight, 1 o'clock, and keeping you on the phone really late at night, not even thinking about you having to get up early if they're not taking you into consideration, even just things like that, which would be a boundary. You know what? I have to work tomorrow. We'll have to talk another time. This is not good for me. I need my sleep. If you're getting passive aggressive responses from them, like, oh, okay, or just K, those short K text messages you get, K, okay, or if they get defensive. So if you're just meeting somebody and they're already calling you 100 times a day, texting you nonstop, that's breaking a boundary. Nobody should be doing that. Everyone has a life outside of a relationship, especially if you're just dating and getting to know someone. So where are your boundaries, right? Are they breaking your boundaries? Are they taking you into consideration? Maybe you're single and you have children that you're responsible for. Are they just showing up randomly to your door? Are they not calling you to first make arrangements? Do they just show up? You will see with someone like this personality, they have an entitlement where they don't feel they have to ask you anything. They just do what they want to do. That is a big red flag, the entitlement, boundary breaking. Another red flag a lot of people don't talk about is a lot of narcissists will overshare with you very quickly in the relationship. They overshare their past mistakes. And it sounds weird because you think, well, why would they confess these things? It's to garner empathy from you. They're testing your empathy markers. So, for example, you could have someone you just met and they're going to start, I don't know, they could have been in jail, let's say. And they start telling you, yeah, I was in jail, or I did this, or I did that. And they're going to just totally overshare all of their horrible history with you. That's a red flag. They're testing your empathy marker. They want to see your empathy and they want to elicit a response from you. They're testing you to see what you will accept and what is for you, what is healthy to you. The other thing, the over-attentiveness, breaking your boundaries, entitlement, not asking, just showing up, calling you at random times when they know you have to do something or take care of children, passive-aggressive comments. And the other one would be affection too early, too quick in the beginning. And I'm just going to be really raw here, and I'm going to say that if there are sexual advances really, really soon, very quickly, there's an intimacy there, that is a boundary breaker. And that is something that a lot of narcissists will use to hook people. Either the woman will do it to the man or the man to the woman. They will use that as bait. And it may sound silly because, you know, that's the way God made us, and many people, that's every desire someone has, but they're going to do it very quickly because they use it as a performance, and that is a part of the hook as well. It's manipulative. It is coercive. Another red flag is, disappearing, ghosting, they call it. Today it's called ghosting. So they're going to text for like 2-3 days, and then all of a sudden they just disappear. And you're like, did something happen? Did I say something wrong? That was purposely done to get that response from you. So if you find yourself feeling like you've done something wrong, or you feel like this person just disappeared and it's been days since they contacted you after contacting you for so long, that is a red flag. They're testing. What they're trying to do is they're testing and trying to push your attachment. Like, they want you to chase. They want to see if you're going to chase them. They want to see how you're going to respond to their non-response, to their silence, right? That is another red flag. Another red flag, I'm trying to think, there's quite a few.
I think that's enough for those who are not in a relationship yet. For those who are already in a relationship or in a marriage, what are the things they need to look at? Because not everybody knows that I'm married to a toxic man or narcissist and all that, right? So what are the things they need to look out for them to know that, oh, this woman is it this, or that man is it? Because, I mean, it could be both ways, right?
So you're talking they're already married and already in the relationship. Here's what I'll say. Most people know. You just know. Because their behaviors, the most obvious thing is erratic behavior. So they go from being kind and sweet to erratic and raging, and the littlest things can set them off. When you know deep down, wait a minute, that was not really worth that response. That response is not in line. That is not aligned with what we just talked about. I think what it is because if it is a narcissistic relationship or highly toxic, I think what it is that people know something's off, but they can't put their finger on it. And that was me in my marriage for 21 years. I always knew there was something, but because I had no one to talk to and because I didn't have the knowledge and all of that, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew deep down something wasn't right. This is my thing. This is my suggestion that I want people to know. If you're feeling like that, if you feel like something's off and you're feeling like, you know, he's not or she's not treating you properly, or that their behavior is off, you know, maybe they're ignoring you, maybe they're not, you know, if you're married, maybe they've cut off sexual intimacy. If there's a financial thing and they're holding the money and they're not letting you have money, and they're withholding financial secrets from you, that's another thing that they can do. It's all about control. If you're feeling that way, I encourage people to reach out either to a therapist, like a Christian therapist or a therapist. Reach out to a friend, someone that you can trust, someone that you know is not going to gaslight you more or question you, like, or judge you. That's the biggest thing, right? Is you don't want to be judged. So you have to be, this is the hard part. And this is why, you know, organizations like, you know, WEM and what you're doing, bringing stories like this to the forefront is so good, because it's getting out there. It's sharing the stories so that people know, oh, there's someone there I could go to. There's someone that understands me. I'm validated. Like, hopefully women and men that see this, they will be like, wow, yeah, I went through that.
Not the problem, you know.
Right. So that it's not you. You know, okay, hold on a second here. No, something's off here. That's what I encourage people to do. Reach out to someone you can trust, whether it's a therapist, If it's a pastor and you have a good relationship, then by all means, you can do that. But you have to be careful, because what can happen, which happened to me a few times in the beginning of my marriage, was I was invalidated because people would say, well, this is life, this is marriage, it's hard, you have to fight for it. Pray for him. Wow. You know, don't talk about it, just pray to God. God will do it. You know, there's a lot of spiritual bypassing. So we have to be very cautious, but if you feel something is off, it's, people in the world would say trust your gut.
Yeah.
I'd say trust, listen to the Holy Spirit. Get to know the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit you will feel it. That's what it is. It's the Holy Spirit nudging you that this is not right. And let me tell you, abuse, I don't care what anybody says, God does not tolerate abuse of any form. And if people have that misconception, go back and read how Jesus instructed the men to love their wife. Okay? There is no abuse. We know what love is. It's in 1 Corinthians 13. If that is absent, if there is abuse and criticism and constant cheating and lying and gaslighting, you're being abused. You're being abused, and you need to reach out for help.
Wow.
So those are some of the red flags. You know that the same chemicals that are released from intermittent reinforcement, which is the kindness, the love, and then the criticism and the anger and the rage, the same chemicals are just as addictive as heroin.
Wow.
This is also why women cannot get out and men can't get out. They're addicted. It's almost an addiction. I've heard some people call it addiction ships, but it's been proven. Like, this is an actual psychological, clinical thing that they have discovered. It's the same addiction. It's the same chemical. They're peptides. They're called peptides. And they're released during intermittent reinforcement. So when they've treated you really, really horrible and they come back with this love, it's like the heroin. You get that shot because you're looking for it now. You're craving that love and validation. And they know that. That's why they beat you down. And then they're going to come back with that hit of heroin. They're going to give you all that love. They're going to give you all that attention again. And it's because you're dying for it. It's like, love me. Where's that love you were giving me? Your body's actually craving it like heroin.
I think that the last set of people would be people who went through this, went through what you went through. And like you, they found the courage to leave. But they're like, okay, so what next? Maybe they're just one day out of it, 1 week, 1 month, and they're still struggling. What would you say to them?
What I would say, grace. Give yourself grace. You have to understand that you have just come out of a hurricane. You have to understand that your nervous system has been in fight or flight mode for so long. You're not going to know what is up and what is down for a long time. So you need to give yourself grace. Don't expect too much from yourself. And the other thing I would say is this, and I would say this is probably the most important place, and the most important thing is to forgive yourself. Many people get stuck in their healing because they can't forgive themselves. And listen, I was there. I was one of those people that was like, oh my gosh, you fell for it again. A second time? You're so stupid. What was I thinking? It's not got anything to do with that. You were coerced. You were manipulated. Coercion is this. Coercion is when you are not given all of the truth to make the proper decision. And in my case, the last situation, I did not know this man was married. Had I even heard he was married, I would have never stepped foot near that man. Not a foot, not an inch. In fact, I would have had no respect for him. So remember, who they were in the beginning is not who they really were. You didn't know better. You were coerced and you were manipulated. So you need to forgive yourself for even getting into the relationship in the first place. You had no choice. And in some countries, I don't know if you know this, but in some countries now, coercive control is actually a criminal charge. It's a criminal code. Yeah. You are completely removing that person's consent. And people obviously will make the wrong decision without the proper evidence and the proper facts, right? So forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, because how else would you know when someone's telling you they love you, they adore you, that you're their soulmate? That's also a lot. That's a red flag too. If someone's calling you their soulmate after 2 weeks, run. Run. Right? So,
oh my goodness. Wow, you shared so much. Like, I feel like this video is not even enough to cover everything. Like, I feel like we need to call you again and again, because there's so many things we didn't touch because of time, and I think we've run into 1 hour plus, and I'm like, oh God, we need to end this, but there's so many things she's saying, right? I just want to say thank you. And I think we might have to call you back and look at another angle of it, because these things need to be said.
Yes.
People need to know.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there are people who are dying in silence. There are people who refuse to leave, or because of my children, or because of what people are going to say, what the church will say, what my friends will say. Who cares?
Yeah. I know.
And there are those, and those who are Christian, like, oh, God loves you more.
Absolutely.
Your life is more important to him.
Yes. And your children's lives, and it's so important. And the one aspect I didn't get to touch on, and the most important is God. Without him, sister, I would not be here today.
I know.
I wouldn't be sitting here telling you my story. There was a time I hit rock bottom in my marriage where the only way out was the worst way. And I know that a lot of women can understand that, and even men can identify with that.
Yeah, because both ways, right?
Yeah, you can get so broken down where you're so empty and confused, but I just got to give glory to God, because I know without him, I would not be where I am today. And when people ask me how I did it and how strong I was through all of that, it is God. There is no other answer. Let's give credit
to who credits you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What a revelation. Me. What an eye-opening. What a name we call it. I don't even have words to express it. I just hope and pray that a lot of people learn from this.
Yes.
And they wake up one day and say, look, I've had enough. No, I've had enough. I need to, something needs to be done, right?
Yes.
Or someone who is not married yet, but in a relationship, and is seeing all this red flag, and say, you know what? No. It's time to.
Right.
Yeah, because it said that a broken friendship is better than a broken relationship. A broken relationship is better than a broken marriage. A broken marriage is better than death.
Yes, that's so good. That's so true.
Yeah, so whichever level or stage you are in your life, hearing this, you should say to yourself, if it's just a relationship, no, it's time to.
That's right.
Back up. If it's a marriage, you're like, no. You cannot change anybody.
You can't.
You can't. Only God can, and you are not God.
That's right. So. And you know what? The amazing thing is that God has so much better.
Yeah.
There's so much better.
Yes.
But because you're bonded to this person, and there's an attachment, and there's also something else. There's also a very deep spiritual side to this as well, which I didn't get to talk much about, but maybe another time we can talk about, is the deliverance side, that the power of God and authority that we have to break those bonds. Because God
it's not just enough to step out. It's not just enough to leave. You have to be delivered.
You have to. Yes. That's the reason I was able to finally cut the cord, was because I submitted my will, and I just said, I can't do this no more, God. You have to get to a place where you're absolutely desperate for freedom.
And you can't do it yourself. There's got to be a higher power, something stronger than you.
Yes.
Because if you could do it yourself, you would have done it.
You would have done it a long time ago.
You wouldn't need to wait for 21 years, right?
Exactly. But when I submitted my life completely. Because, you know, we can say to God, oh God, I give it to you. But he knows. There's that little room. You're not opening that door, right? But don't go in that door. You can go here and you can go there, but don't touch that door, right? That's what I had been doing. But this last time around, I was just on my face.
Give it all.
And I said, take it.
All.
I don't want it. And I tell you, and it's such a miracle, but from that moment, nothing has stopped. Even sitting here with you, meeting you, this is all a part of that day of me surrendering my will to God and saying, God, not my will, but your will be done. And boy, did he move.
And his will is always better.
It is.
We don't know, right?
Well, sometimes we do, but we're fooled. We believe that this is the only option, you know? And I want to tell people just quickly too that remember your value. Know your identity in Christ. Because when you know who you are in Christ, no man, no woman can fool you. They may try, but when you really begin to identify with who you are and who God says you are, that you are chosen, you are adopted in, you are loved, you are cherished, come on, girl. You are precious, right? You honestly, that's when you stand, and that's when you know your worth and your value, and you'll never allow someone to treat you like that again.
Amen, sister.
Yes.
You know, we could go on and on, but I think it's time to stop because, oh my goodness.
Yeah, a lot of editing, right?
I just want to say thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me, girl. Thank you.
And I do look forward to having you back because there's a lot we need to uncover, right? So
I'd be honored. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, that's it, folks.